steadfast in thy word. Curb those who...
The Lord be with you. Welcome to this episode of our 316 study. Today, 3 books, or really just one. As we go book by book, we come to Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. No 316, yes a 316, no 316. I'm not just going to skip over Ezra and Esther. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them either. But since they are included in the Bible, I will say something about them. Especially Ezra and Nehemiah. They're kind of a mini unit within the Old Testament. Both are historical books. I put one date on the board, 537 BC, because the Israelites were gone. They'd been taken away into captivity in Babylon. And they'd been allowed to return. Ezra and Nehemiah were significant figures in their return. Return means you turn again. So they've gone and they've turned back and are heading back home to Israel. Part of their job was to rebuild. When the Israelites were taken into captivity, their captors destroyed Jerusalem. All of the nice things that the Israelites had, all the nice things they had in the temple, they were now being used for bad things, for wicked things. So there was some shame in that. So they had to rebuild the walls. And part of it was saying, hey, look at this stone, it can still be used. So some of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem was also repairing the walls of Jerusalem, repairing the buildings and the structures. And they did this while there were enemies around them. So while they rebuilt, they had to keep one eye open for their enemies. And so they had a shovel, a tool in one hand, and they had their sword in their other, just in case they needed to stop and defend themselves. So they rebuilt the walls, they cooperated. And as we'll hear in just a moment, one of the places they rebuilt was the pool of Shelah, which we believe is the same pool of Siloam, which has a connection to the Gospel of Luke and of John, where those pools are referenced, especially in John chapter 9, the healing of the man who was born blind. Jesus told him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he talks about how he is the one who has been sent by the Father, and that whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. So you receive Jesus and you receive the Father, because Jesus is the one who was sent to seek and to save the lost. So let's hear Nehemiah 3:16. After him, Nehemiah the son of Azbuk, ruler of half the district of Beth Zur, repaired to a point opposite the tombs of David, as far as the artificial pool, and as far as the house of the mighty men. That's a 3:16. Again, maybe not as much of a meaty verse as others are, but it reminds us of the rebuilding that had to take place as the people of Israel were carried away, punished for their rejection of God, of His word, of His commands. Ezra and Nehemiah both bring to us the return of the people to their land, maybe more significantly, the return of the people to God, to lining up behind Him, right? A lot of times in our life with God, He needs to get behind me. I'm going to take the lead. I know the direction to go. And it's not too long after that we find out we have no idea where we are. God, why don't you lead? How about I follow you the way I should have done it in the first place? So the people return to God. They line up behind Him. And they start repairing their life. After Ezra and Nehemiah, we find Esther. Lots of things that we can read in this book. Kind of a dramatic story. No mention of the Lord in this book. So some people have said, why? Why do we have it in this book? Well, perhaps for the way that God is with us in all situations, and how God desires us to live our life. Maybe let's work backwards. In the book of Esther, we find a feast that the Lord did not command His people to celebrate. Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, yep, God commanded that. The Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur, yep, God commanded that too. Passover, God commanded that one. Purim or Purim, God did not command that one. At the end of the whole Esther saga, the people decide to have a Thanksgiving feast. A lot of Jewish festivals involve Thanksgiving and gratitude. God is with His people all the time. He never takes a day off, never is away. That kind of sounds like something we would be grateful for. So how did we get to this day of Thanksgiving, this day of celebration, this day when we recognize that our sorrow has been turned into celebrating? You have turned my mourning into dancing. How did we get here? Well, there's kind of three people: Esther, Mordecai, and Haman. The people of Israel were again in captivity. They were away from their homeland. The king had a large harem. Esther, a Jewish girl, was part of that, and she was very pretty, very lovely. And the king saw how lovely she was and chose her to be his wife. Mordecai was Esther's uncle. a Jew. Haman worked for the king, was not a Jew. Haman saw that Esther was favored by the king and was afraid that the king would favor Esther and her people. So he plotted to have the Jews destroyed. And he made some gallows. And he tricked the king, deceived the king into making laws against the Jews. And the king said, that seems like a reasonable idea. Well, king, I already have gallows made. So when they start breaking your laws, we're ready for the hangings. Mordecai learned of this trick, this trap, and revealed the plan to Esther, who was horrified, and Mordecai encouraged Esther to tell her husband, the king. Esther was a little afraid, and this is where we get that really nice verse. Esther, you have been made queen for such a time as this. This is a time when you can open your mouth and speak. And that's what Esther did. She told the king, and the king was upset that he had been deceived in such a way. So those gallows that had been built for the Jews, well, those are the gallows that Haman hung from. The king put to death all of the plotters who were going to kill the Jews, who were going to wipe them out. So that's the book of Esther. There's no 3:16 in Esther, but there is a good story. And there is good encouragement for us to open our mouth when we have the chance, when we see injustice, when we see the opportunity to encourage someone. And there's the good reminder for us to be thankful, to live our life with some gratitude for all that the Lord has done for us, to thank him for watching over us, for giving us a new day, a new opportunity. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next episode with another 3:16. Thanks.